recording has started. Okay, so yeah, perfect. Brilliant. So hi, Carys. Hi. It's really good to speak to you and to see you. Thank you so much for joining us and helping us out spread awareness of paediatric feeding disorder and your story with Hattie.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
And so just, I don't know if you could just start a little bit by maybe just sharing some of your journey and experiences with Hattie and her kind of feeding difficulties and feeding issues.
Sure. So Hattie's 10 now, and she was born in 2013, so it's a long time ago now, it feels. She was born, had a normal birth, and we had a normal pregnancy with Hattie, and she came out, but she didn't want to feed. And that's where it all started, really, for us. So we were medicalised sort of almost straight away in terms of feeding. Jumped through all the hoops. Is it milk allergy? Why was she vomiting? Why was she choking? Yeah. She didn't have a suck. She couldn't breastfeed, couldn't feed her with a bottle very easily to start with. Even leaving hospital was difficult for us in that sense. So it sort of started from day zero, really, for us. But we didn't know back then how big a journey it would be. We kind of were thrust into the world of medical stuff because at 6 weeks old, she was diagnosed with a heart defect. And at 4 months, it was fixed surgically by open heart surgery. And we were still struggling with the feeding. She had an NG tube in for a long time because she wasn't putting on weight. Still vomiting, still choking with feeds. And we were weaned at 17 weeks from advice from the dietitian in the hospital at the time. She recovered quite well from her heart surgery quite quickly. They bounced back, which is brilliant, and was such a happy time for us. We were sort of assured by the cardiologist that her feeding would pick up. Her heart was strong enough now to carry on with the feeding and hopefully absorb the calories, and we would get on a trajectory of getting on weight on. And that didn't ever quite materialize for us. And we were under the dietitians, community paediatricians, and also in the hospital as well. She was diagnosed with a few allergies, and all this time we were trying to wean, and we weren't really getting very far with weaning. So we carried on for a while, saw some really amazing specialists down in the Evelina Children's Hospital, specialist feeding people, salt team. She had a bear and swallow to see if she had anything, sort of medically wrong. Nothing, but we just couldn't get past the fact that she couldn't have lumps in food, and she would do this retching with sort of vomiting, choking all the time. But we kind of just persevered, as we were told, just to carry on because we needed the calories in her, and she wasn't growing. She was sort of small, and we carried on. We had lots of supplements. We tried everything, and 2 or 3 years went by. We were still really dealing with a child that was at a weaning stage, even at 3 or 4 years old. And we sort of tried to engage with dietitians via the NHS and sort of had mixed help, really. Lots of milkshakes, build me up shakes. Nothing really ever stuck. We couldn't get them into her. She just couldn't physically do it. And meal times were really difficult. We would take, she wouldn't eat much volume. It would take an hour and a half for her to eat sort of 10 pieces of penne pasta that we'd taken 3 years to get her to a place where she would eat it. Things like vegetables, crunchy things were better. She sort of lived on crisps. That was her main source of calories. Had a very, very strict sort of restricted diet. Couldn't eat anything together. Things like, other babies and other children would love, things like lasagna or pasta with spaghetti bolognese with cheese on top, pizza, all of that. Just could never get her to eat anything that had anything on it together. And we struggled for a long time. And, I would sit there at breakfast. We'd get up extra early. We'd have breakfast for an hour and a half, and then she'd go to school, and then she'd have lunch at school. But lunch was a packed lunch that she came home with that had nothing, really eaten out of it. And then tea was another hour and a half with, 5-10 pieces of pasta, a yogurt. If tiny petit falou yogurt, we'd have like a teaspoon of it, and she would retch, and then that would be it. So that actually was a large proportion of our life, probably from, 3 to sort of 7, 8 years old. And then we moved from London and arrived in Shropshire, and I just got to a point where I felt that she needed more help, and the paediatrician agreed for us to be seen by the dietitian locally. And I just remember going into the appointment, sat down, and she said, "All right, so how can I help you then?" And we had 10 minutes, and I sort of was like, right, let me tell you about the last sort of 8 years, 7, 8 years. So she saw us, gave us loads of shakes, and in the end, I desperately emailed her after a really difficult weekend of feeding where she barely ate anything. And I remember emailing, I luckily work at the hospital, and I just emailed her directly because I just didn't know what to do. And I just said, I think we need some psychological help here. Is there anywhere that you can recommend that would give us some psychological help for her as well as a dietitian point of view? And she just happened to mention that there was this new clinic that was had opened, and it was called the Feeding Trust. Maybe you could try there. And she left the trust after that. I never saw that dietitian again. I don't even know where she went. And I just emailed the Feeding Trust, and I said, well, I don't know if I'm actually qualified for my daughter to come and see you, but please, can you just see her and see what you think? And it went from there, really.
Oh, that's amazing, and amazing to hear the story at the beginning. And, you know, I know that must have been so difficult and so hard, but amazing that by chance and by luck you found help, which is really good.
Yeah.
And so, you know, how can you share a little bit maybe about your experiences? Obviously, we kind of got to the bit in the story where you've come to see the Feeding Trust. How did that support you, or how did that kind of change things for you?
So we, I remember the day really clearly, actually, because I remember saying to my husband, I was like, right, we're going to go to this place, and it's not even NHS. We're going to have to go and see them, and we're going to have to explain what's been happening for the last sort of 8 years. And I'm not sure they're going to believe us. And we're just going to have to go and see them and see what they say. And I don't even know if they're going to be able to help us. And what if they say that there's nothing wrong and we're just making it all up, and my husband equally felt the same. And we sort of, got in the car, and all the way I was thinking, oh, I don't even know if this is right. And I'd read everything online about the Feeding Trust, and it just seemed too good to be true in a way, that all these people existed in one place, like a true MDT, multidisciplinary team, and that they were going to help maybe us find a way to sort of not cure Hattie, but give us the tools to move forward. And we arrived, and it was an amazing, place. And we met Becky, an OT, and then Lucy, the dietitian, and Natalie as well. And spent, I think, in the end, 3 hours there just talking over, relaying all the information. And it was such a safe environment to be in. And they were lovely, first of all, just so warming, and just kind of wanted to help and listen to our story. And we managed to get Hattie to sort of be distracted away from us, drawing, colouring and doing various things so we could share our story. And then we sat down and went through, sort of did some feeding exercises and things like that, and sort of went away. And from that, realised when the 11-page document arrived through the post, succinctly explaining every single thing that they'd noticed about Hattie, and that actually she had a paediatric feeding disorder, and that her mechanics of her chewing was not allowing her to sort of chew properly, so that she was doing all this retching. And so it was, and I read it, I obviously burst into tears because I just couldn't believe that somebody had actually believed us. We felt heard, believed, all of that. And we started on the journey, and then from that point onwards, it was actually 2020, and it was COVID. They saw us. We were very lucky to see them at that point, actually, and actually get some help. And it was nice because they sort of reassured us, but they also, I felt, gave us a little pat on the back and said, you've done amazingly so far, so let's try and give you some more help. And that was a really lovely moment as a parent to actually receive that feedback, because it's just you're up against the cold face all the time going, oh, when is this going to end? So that was really lovely, and they were a great team to be introduced to.
Yeah, I think you're so right, isn't it? It's kind of like being listened to, and actually somebody taking the time to spend listening to your story, but also then having the knowledge to be able to teach and help you with the therapy. I kind of likened it to having like a lot of keys. When you're on your own, you're kind of trying each key not very consistently, and then somebody's kind of like, actually, you know what? We know this works, and that's so helpful. And like you say, really warm and friendly team.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I agree. Definitely all those points. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. And so, like, I'm just trying to think in terms of kind of just a little bit before obviously you found the feeding trust. What were some of the biggest challenges that you faced with Hattie's feeding? What were some of the, and how do you overcome those? Or did you, I guess, maybe not overcome them until you had therapy?
Yeah, so I'd say there was a few. It's difficult because I'm actually been kind of reconditioned to put up with a lot of the things we were putting up with. That was just our life. So we had to find a way to sort of break our cycles as well in terms of sitting there. So the time that we were sitting at the table was immense. Each meal was taking an hour and a half. We were sitting with her directly in front of us, almost watching every mouthful so that she didn't, if she choked, we would be there. It was quite an intense feeling and an intense atmosphere. And sometimes, we really lost our patience and we didn't want to do that, but there was nothing left in the tank. We'd done it all and it just didn't work. So timing, the time at the table was the main thing. Her retching and choking, even though it had got better with age, it was still the retching that would then induce potential vomit. And that was the difficulty, is breaking that cycle down and giving her the tools to try and use different parts of her mouth to actually chew. And, all of those things we obviously learned from when the Feeding Trust diagnosed those things, but those things were recognisable before we started in the Feeding Trust. But I didn't know how to break those cycles. So I could easily have said before the Feeding Trust, right, that's it, 20 minutes at the table, we're not going to do any more. But then it would be on me because I've set that boundary and I wouldn't then allow her to have those calories. And so I felt the guilt of then not being able to give my daughter as many calories as she could. So when we went to the Feeding Trust, the change in that kind of sort of nugget was that Lucy, the dietitian, said, I'm going to take that all from you. I'm going to take all of the burden of the calories that that Hattie needs to consume, and I'm going to take that and I'm going to look after that for you. It's going to sit over here, and all I want you to do is get to the table, eat the main meal for 20 minutes, maybe possibly 5 minutes for pudding if that's what you want to do, and that's where we're just going to stop it. You're going to get a timer, we're going to do this, and that's the way it's going to be. And it was just this massive like, oh, okay, thanks. All right, yeah, we'll go and do that. That's, and that completely changed our whole family life, really, because we could do things in the evening. We didn't have to sit there trudging through. We could have dinner and then go for a walk, or like leave dinner a little bit later because we knew we'd be able to have, it'd just be this 20 minutes that we'd have to do it all in. So that was a major breakthrough for us, because it meant that we didn't have the burden and the guilt because somebody else was looking after that for us. And then as we went through the program, Lucy obviously introduced different tools in terms of how, different calories, different foods to provide the extra calories that she would need. And that probably was, the timing. And also, Hattie had a sensory problem in the sense that she couldn't sit still at the table because she just was in this fight or flight mode, because she was so scared almost, even though she didn't really recognise that she was scared at the time, of retching and then vomiting, and then that would be the end of dinner. So we had to work with Becky the OT to actually find some things where she was not thinking about the control aspect of coming to the table and sitting and worrying about that before she was coming to the table. So we had a lot of different ways of doing that. We'd do lots of runs around the garden before we came to tea, and we'd do some exercises, or we'd play a little game or something, and then she would come down and sit down, and then otherwise she would be in the kitchen going, what's for tea, why am I having that, why, you know, there was just nothing that was getting past her. She's very controlling in that sense, because she was worried about it. Yeah, so.
That's amazing. I think you put it really well. I think, you know, in terms of the burden, you know, when feeding is difficult, it is a big burden, and obviously our stories are quite different, but I do remember, I think, Lucy saying to me, you know, we know this works, so, you know, just kind of go through the actions of and what we're supporting you with. And actually, when you're in such a difficult situation, just being able to act out what someone else is telling you rather than having to think about it really takes, I found, I don't know if you found the same thing, really takes the pressure off.
Yeah, and the tools, the you know, once we started on the sort of SOS sort of, you know, grid of climbing the stairs through the 32 steps, it was an amazing way to actually explain it to yourself in those moments as well, because you're kind of like, well, everybody wants your child to eat the piece of sausage, but getting to that point is another matter. And no matter how many times you say, just put it in your mouth and chew, that to Hattie is so, it doesn't work. So we had to go through the motions, and it, in a way, you know, we came from a medicalized place, and I suppose because, you know, I'm also in healthcare, so I had a very kind of straightforward, I'm not particularly fluffy around the edges about things, but it was nice to have that kind of sort of low-key type way of introducing a food, instead of like, bang, here it is on your plate, you need to try it, and this is how we're going to do it. You know, it was more like, right, okay, pick it up, let's have a look at it. Oh, you know, you don't have to even touch it. You could, you know, it was the 32 steps that were broken down that then made me and my husband Dan just kind of go, okay, well, we don't have to put it in our mouth yet. We can just have it on here if you like. We'll just play with it here for a minute, you know. And then the next time we introduced it was a little bit further, and it does work. It does. 32 steps do work. We can definitely clarify that.
I think you're right, isn't it? Because we think, you know, it goes from the plate straight to your mouth and there's no in between, but you know, that's not the case. And I think we don't,
for a sensitive really person, it's difficult. It's really difficult.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. It's been so brilliant to hear all your experiences. And what advice would you give to someone sitting there now thinking, oh, have I got issues? I don't know what to do. Or, you know, what would you do to, what would you say to somebody in a position that you were in now?
Well, I think the Feeding Trust provides such an amazing safe space to be heard, like I've mentioned before. And I would say that if you truly believe that you have an issue with anything in a sort of sensory way or in a feeding way or how to introduce new foods, then there's such a wealth of knowledge in that group of people that they would have. Even the smallest nugget of information can help you in 1,000 ways, and it breaks it down, and it's breaking it down and allowing you as a parent to kind of see it from the child's perspective, and then how to introduce that in a sort of safe way and in a way that they will understand. Getting from A to B, it's worth trying. And, you know, being able to contact the Feeding Trust, reading all of their stuff online is as, you know, there might be something there that will just click and think, oh, I'll try that. But it is nice to have the input from the Feeding Trust in terms of the face-to-face sort of appointments as well, because they're able to see the child and have a look at, you know, how they're interacting with food, because a lot of it is to do with how the child perceives what they're going to see and how they're going to react to different foods and things. I think it's difficult to, obviously everybody's journey is different, and, you know, it's so unique to the child. It would be hard to kind of generalize, but a lot of what we learn is generalized, and, you know, we can add a few things. And a lot of friends who have struggling with, you know, things, I just sort of say, you know, you've got to say food is food, and we do, and just take the emotion out of it, and and all these little things that Lucy's sort of, or Becky's like, she's sitting on my shoulder, to just, yeah, it's okay, you can do this now, you can sit here now, you can try this now, and these sort of positive affirmations, in the sense of just being quite direct towards the child and just giving them courage to try and do the next step in the ladder, really. But yeah, I think, reading all the stuff online on the website, yeah, I think it's just worth getting in touch, because you never know, there might be something that it would be easily fixed, even if it might take 4 years, but it's fixable in the end.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Carys. It's been brilliant to hear about Hattie and her journey, and everything. So thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome.